All right, everybody. How do we usually start? It's Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. Been trying times for Am Yisrael. We don't know what's on its way, nor how things will be dealt with. And even having a class tonight is not an easy task because there's so much going through everybody's minds. We're looking at a few different topics. I'm going to try to somewhat intertwine them, but for the most part, we're going to be looking at a teshubah written about 40 years ago by Rabbi Haim David HaLevy. At the time, there was a similar situation where soldiers and whatnot were captured. Of course, the Israeli government had numerous terrorists in the Israeli prison, and talks came up about exchanging these prisoners for soldiers. Talking about approximately 1,000 terrorist prisoners for one soldier at the time. And obviously, there was a lot of talk among the politicians, but then they made a decision that they're going to make the exchange. Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who's the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, was very upset about it. He said it goes against Halakhah, and he cannot see how anybody could allow such a thing, and it should not have happened. As we know, Rabbi Haim David HaLevy always tries to find a way to deal with reality, justify a situation if possible, and bring Halakhah to the level of, humanity and what people want to hear or need to hear, as long as it falls into the scope of broader Halakhah. Like I said, it's not an easy topic to deal with because we're dealing with what we saw on October 7th. We talk about them as Arabs, as Ishmaelim, but the way they're acting, they're definitely Amalek. There's absolutely no question about it. And if you want to tell me, no, it's a different race of people, it has nothing to do with a race of people, because even the Zohar, as in numerous places, as well as numerous Hacharim at different times, they tell us that once a nation or a group of people has the mindset of Amalek, that means they have the genes of Amalek, the DNA of Amalek in them. And the Zohar tells you straight out that both Isav and Ishmael are Amalek. And we see it in the writings of numerous rabbis. There was a famous rabbi in the time of expulsion Spain, Rabbi Abraham Sabah, and he mentioned it in numerous places as well in his writings, talking about the Arabs that were in Spain, the Arabs that tortured the Jews that were being, exiled from Spain and moving into the deserts of Morocco and what they did to them over there, as well as, of course, to Christian Spain and what they were doing to the Jews. And they said, this is all Zira Amalek. There's no question about it. And what we're seeing today is a continuation of Zira Amalek, that Hamas is being funded through Iran, Aryan is the same thing. Nazis and Iran have similar DNA as well. It's been proven. It's all Amalek. There's no question about it. Haman was already from Iran. The connections are all there, so it doesn't make a difference. I needed to bring that up because it's been something that's bothering me. We'll look at the text in front of us. We'll try to stick to it, try to understand it, and see what's going on and how the Hacham deals with this problem. Pidyon Shibuyim Timurat Shihrur Mehabbilim. The rescuing of hostages in place of releasing terrorists. It's funny, Rabbi Haim David HaLevy never put something in the title in parentheses like that, but he's saying this is a problem that requires a Hiddush in Halakhah. We need a new Halakhah. We need something because it didn't exist before. Such a scenario never existed before in Halakhah, so nobody has written about it before. This situation of having we as a Jewish nation having so many terrorist prisoners and our enemy holding on to one of ours. That ratio never existed. It was always them taking, and we never had anything. And now, really, the tides are turned. How do we deal with it? קראתי בעניין רב את מאמרו של כבוד הרב הגאון רבי שלמה גורן, שליטה, על פדיון שבויים תמורת שחרור מחבלים לפי ההלכה, בהסופה מיום י"א סיוון תשמע. Okay, 1985. So as far as I know, even though this is 1985, as far as I know, the whole situation happened prior to that, and at a time when Rabbi Gordon was still chief rabbi as well. Because I want to make one comment, one basic foundational comment. כבוד הגאון בי שלמה גורן, שליטה, בונה פסק הלכה ברור ומחובר. Yes, Rabbi Gordon builds a beautiful, well-built halachic explanation. שאסור היה לפדות את חיילינו השבויים תמורת 1,150 מחבלים. Yes, it's forbidden to redeem our soldiers for this many terrorists, 1,150. על יסוד המשנה המפורסמת, based upon a famous Mishnah in מסכת גיטין, אין פודין את השבויים יותר על כדי דמיהן, מפני תיקון העולם. You never redeem anybody more than what they are worth, because otherwise it throws off the balance of the world. והסתפקה שם הגמרא. The Gemara obviously has different questions and debates and concerns. אם זה כדי שלא לדחוק את הציבור להוציא הוצאה גדולה ביותר, if it's a statement being made and a concept that they took into practice, so it wouldn't be a tremendous burden upon the Jewish population to be able to deal with that and be able to collect such funds, if you will, and put out that kind of money to ransom a person. או כדי שלא ימסרו עקום נפשם לשבות יותר יהודים שפודים אותם ביוקר. Or so that the goyim themselves don't say, oh, look, the Jews are going to pay us whatever we ask for. Let's kidnap more and more Jews. And therefore, we're going to put this burden upon the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation can constantly have to pay us. And they're going to fall to the poverty level. And we're going to destroy them that way. And obviously, they were not able to fully clear away this question over there, fully answer it. And for a summary, brought a number of words of the poskim. It seems that according to many of the poskim, it's so they don't constantly go out and abduct more and more Jews. And if you look in Harambam, Hilchot Matanot Aniyim, because we know in Hilchot Matanot Aniyim, we know when we did the summer series on Tzedakah, we saw that Harambam spoke at length about using Tzedakah to redeem people that have been kidnapped, abducted, taken as hostages, put into prisons unjustly, whatever it may be. So Harambam writes, "En podin et hashibuyim biyoter adamihin, mipnei tikun ha'olam shelo yiyu ha'oibim rodfim acharihem lishbotam ad kan lishuno." Exactly like we said, Harambam says we don't ransom people just for the sake of, of the goyim wanting to do it over and over again and to constantly take more and more Jews. Let me just finish the sentence over here. Ve'ochiach. And he proved, and it was proven through the Girsa of the Yerushalmi that was copied by the Rashba, even though it's not in the Nushaot that we commonly have in our hands today. Yes, Mark. Tikkun Ha'olam. So obviously, tikkun olam can be explained in many different ways depending on context.
Right.
I don't think there's one.
In this context, though.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Basically, what I think it means the normal way of the world. Otherwise, the world becomes helter-skelter, and people are going to constantly abduct one another.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what
yeah.
clarification.
No,
I think that's what Harambam's alluding to.
I think so. Yeah. Otherwise, everybody's going to be. We're going back to the days of Noah.
Exactly.
Otherwise, that's exactly what it is.
Hamas.
Exactly, Hamas. Listen, it's no mistake that we're dealing with Hamas, we're dealing with Noah, and now we're going with Halakhah. None of this is a mistake. Okay, the question is where we go with it and how much more.
Yes,
What about Yahskil?
the link that somebody sent in chat.
Wait, David put the Rabbi Malka, yeah, okay. Listen, there's definitely a lot of nibbuot, and it all depends how we find them and link them up and connect them to different things. כמו כן, היטיב רב גורן להוכיח שדעת רוב הפוסקים היא שאפילו נשקפת סכנת נפשות לשיבוי אין לפדות ביותם בכדי דמיו. Because even he proves that according to the opinion of most of the poskim, even if it looks dealing with a situation of sakanat nefashot to the shibui, in other words, that person that has been kidnapped, he's in a precarious situation where he may lose his life for it. We still do not redeem him more than what he is worth. וגם זה הוכיח מכמה פוסקים, and this also proved through numerous poskim, ובראשם רבינו הרמב"ם, and at the head of them all, הרמב"ם, שאחרי שהפליג במזוות פדיון שיבויים, ואחד מנימוקיו הוא שהשבוי הרי הוא בכלל הרעבים והשמאים והערומים ועומד בסכנת נפשות, סיים את דבריו שהעתקנו לעיל שאין פודים לשבויים יותם בכדי דמיהן, והיא הוכחה גדולה ומכרעת. והטעם בכל זה משום שאם נחוש לסכנת נפשו של שיבוי זה, נכניס בסכנה רבים אחרים שהשבויים ירדפו אחריהם לשפוטם כדי לרבות אמונתם מחירים גבוהים. Because once we look at the value, net value of this one person, okay, yes, so he's no different than anybody else that is poor and needs clothing and needs food and and is thirsty and whatever the case may be, and he's in sakana, but also all these other people that are outside that are not captured that are also in sakana. And if we're going to put him above and beyond everybody else, and we're going to pay for his net value more than somebody else, we're going to end up putting so many more countless people in a difficult situation where they're going to fall into that situation, not only where they're lacking now, but they're also, maybe captured and killed. So we have to look at reality. And that's what Rabbi Gordon is saying. Because of that, we don't do these prisoner exchanges. And that's it. Case closed. So now we're going to go to what Rabbi Haim David HaLevy, how he wants to look at it a little bit different. We have a few people here. They sent them the.
I don't Joey should.
All right, let me send it to Joey 1 second, because
I'm here. You also sent Rabbi Nathan. You guys should have yours.
all right, I sent it to
Yes,
Joey.
I got mine. Thank you.
Okay, everybody else should have it. Okay. I'm in. I want to open the book just so it'll be easier for me in my eyes. Okay. עוד הוכיח שאין סיבור חייבים להיכנס אפילו לספק פיקוח נפש מפני פיקוח נפש של יחיד. Also, he proved that a sibur, okay, a community, a congregation, a nation, whatever it may be, okay, should never put themselves into a life and death situation just to save somebody else's life. Okay? ואיסור זה הוא פשוט ביותר עם מטרת השבעים היה לקחת בשבי רק יהודים שאסור לפדות אותם להיות מכלי דמיהם והדברים ארוכים. Okay, fine. Now let's move on. כאמור, פסק הלכה הנזכר לעיל, הבנוי על הסוגיה בגיטין, הנזכר לעיל, ופסיקתם של גדולי הראשונים והאחרונים, הוא ברור ונכון. Yes, whatever Rabbi Gordon wrote based upon that section in Gittin, fine, well, it's clear, it's well known, and it's correct. ואף על פי כן נראה לעניות דעתי, אחר המחילה רבה, שאין מכל הנזכר לעיל ראיה מכרעת לדון נדן. He goes, and even though everything that Rabbi Gordon said, and everything he quoted, and everything he's basing upon is all correct, he goes, according to my opinion, okay, and with all due respect, he's saying, I do not think it has any bearing whatsoever on our situation. Okay? After he tells you, it's beautiful, he built a beautiful, teshuvah, he's saying, doesn't apply. Nope. שכן בכל הנ"ל מדובר בכיבוסות של ליסטים שודדים שכל מטרתם היא לסחוט כספים רבים ככל האפשר תמורת פדיון השבויים. Because in all these cases that we see in the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Rishonim and the Aharonim, they're all talking about the same thing, groups of bandits that are just out for money and no other reason. They kidnap people, ransom, they make money, they move on, they ransom somebody, kidnap somebody else, ransom, make money, and they go on. That's the way they make their money, they make a living. Okay? Or mechiratam abadim, or they steal them and so they could sell them off as slaves. Okay? Which unfortunately still goes on today. ולכן פשוט וברור שכל כניעה לסחטונותם תחדיר תאובנם ותרבה את רדיפתם לשבות דווקא יהודים המרבים במחיר הפדיון. He goes, and if we deal with it in the same way, all you're going to do, you're going to have, instead of this being a retail operation, it's going to go into a wholesale situation where they're going to be stealing groups of them to do the same thing. ואילו אנו נתונים במצב מלחמה קשה וממושך עם כלל העם הפלסטיני. But we're in a different situation. We are in the state of war, and a difficult war, with this Palestinian nation. שמתוכו יעשו כיבוסות הלוחמות באכזריות בעם היהודי בארצו. And there's groups of them that come out with cruelness, wickedness against the Jewish nation in our own land. And the basis for all of this is because of nationalism. As long as there's no such solution found for this problem, okay, this war is going to continue to go on and on and on. כיבוסות טרור אלה עושות ככל אשר לאל ידן לפגוע קשות בעם היהודי בכל מידת אפשרויותיהם. These are terror organizations and they keep going to do whatever they can to hurt the Jewish nation. ואין ספק שלא יכלו למסור נפשם לתפוס שבויים יהודים היו עושים זאת מדי יום ביומו. And if they had the ability to go and capture Jews each and every day, they would do it. In order for them to have them, to use them as bait, if you will, for the Jewish nation, for the Jewish government, the Israeli government, to free their family members and their terror buddies that are in the Jewish jails. And maybe even for other state issues like obtaining land. And thank God, because of God's kindness, they're not able to succeed doing these things. How many times have they tried to capture soldiers as well as citizens and they have not been able to? And specifically because of the constant state of war that we're in, and because of the paths that Sahel takes, okay, the Israeli Defense Force takes to watch over all the inhabitants of the land and all the ways of the roads as well as the seas. Okay, so nobody can come in and infiltrate Am Yisrael, and it protects the citizens. לעניות דעתי זו נקודה חשובה מאוד בדיוננו על פדיון שבויינו החיילים. And as far as I'm concerned, Rabbi Haim David HaLevy is saying, this is a crucial point in examining our case over here and why it's different than what Rabbi Gordon is bringing based upon the earlier sources.
We're talking about terror versus.
We're talking about,
The
the bandits are looking for ransom for money only, and over here we're dealing with terror groups with as part of a nation, okay, a made-up nation, but a nation, okay, that want to basically throw us out of the land and take over the land. So it's a whole different situation. Okay, they're not doing their dirty work here today and going someplace else tomorrow and then going someplace else the next day. Okay, they're here to stay, and it's a war. He said it more than once. He said it's a milhama, and it's an ongoing milhama. נקדים שיש בעיות קשות שנוסעות בחיינו, שאין להן פתרון ברור בחותך בהלכה. Because I have to first say, as an introduction, that we have difficult situations that come up in our lives, that they do not have clear-cut answers in Halakhah. וכי היכן יש בכל המשא ומתן הלכתי בסוגיה הנזכרת לעיל, מצב כמו זה שאנו נתונים בו כיום. Because if you look at the entire gamut of halachic literature, you will not find anything like the situation we're dealing with here and now. ולכן, אנו זקוקים בשעה זאת לחידוש הלכתי. Because so therefore we're obligated at this time to create new halakhah. ברוח מקורות ההלכה הקדומים ובתיאום להם. In the spirit of previous halakhah, and of course, what do you call it, in sync with them. היינו הכרעה הלכתית חדשה. We have to make new decisions in halakhah. Powerful. This is Rabbi Haim David HaLevy. That's what you would expect, because he takes after his teacher, Rabbi Ben-Sion Mir Hai Uziel. 1985, he said his wording is. זה היה כוחם של רבותינו. Because this was the strength of our חכמים. שבכל מקרה חדש שבא לידם, any new situation that would come to them, לא הסתפקו באותן הלכות שהיו מסורות בידם עד אז. They would never just rely upon earlier precedents. אלא טרחו לחדש הלכות חדשות. They worked hard, okay, to create new halakha. ודוגמה ברורה לכך הם דברי התוספות בסוגיה הנזכרת. And if you look at the words of the Tosafot in the Sugya of Gitin that we talked about, because you'll see something similar. על אותה סברה המובעת שם בגמרא, כי אחד אלא לגרבו ליתו, כלומר שלא יהיו האויבים מוסרים נפשם לשפוטם. הקשו התוספות, ורבי יהושע בן חנניה תפרקה להוא תינוק בממון הרבה. הסיפור ידוע בסוטה במאמר שם באורך, תרסו בתירוסם הראשון, לפי שהיה מופלג בחוכמה. I'm not familiar with the story. You're saying it's a well-known story, and it's mentioned over there in that article, but I'm not familiar with it. Maybe Rabbi Marky over here is familiar with it. Rabbi Nathan, you're online. Are you familiar with the story that he's referring to?
I am not.
Okay. So I didn't have a chance to look, and I don't want to waste time doing that now, but I'll take his word for it. Bechan. חידש רבי יהושע בן חנניה חידוש הלכתי גדול שלא מסנוהו בשום מקור אחר לפניו. He's saying so there was a חידוש by Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, a חידוש in halacha that was tremendous, that we never found an earlier source for it. שכאשר השבוי מופלג בחוכמה, לא חל עליו דין שאין פודין את שבויים יותר על כדי דמיהם. If the shibui, if the person that was abducted, the person that was kidnapped, okay, he was a genius, okay, muflag b'chokmah, okay, a genius in chokmah. The law that we don't redeem him more than his monetary worth does not apply, because he is in a category of his own. He doesn't fit in with the regular person. V'harosh hibi dibrehem l'halacha. דרבי יהושע פדה התינוק השבוי בדמים מרובים לפי שראו חריף ומפופל. And even though it was a child we're dealing with, a young child, they saw that already he was what we would call today an ilui, a child prodigy. Okay, and because of that, Rabbi Yehoshua redeemed him at a ransom price much higher than anybody would. ואפשר שיהיה אדם גדול בכל שכן מישהו כבר אדם גדול. And even if the person, you see him that he is going to develop into that great person, or is already such a great person, that person you go above and beyond. בחלשון זו פסק בנו הטור. And this is what the Tur writes, okay, his son the Tur, Ben Asher writes in the Tur, וגם מרן, מעין שולחן ערוך. So that became the halacha. וזה כאמור חידוש גדול שאין לו שום מקור קדום, and it has no earlier source for it, no precedence. וחידשו רבי יהושע בן חנניה בגודל סמכותו וחוכמתו. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, he created it based upon his knowledge and his understanding and his wisdom. ועל פי זה נבין מדוע הרמב"ם לא הביא פירת זה להלכה. But now I have to understand, הרמב"ם didn't bring this. שתלמיד חכם שהוא גדול בתורה מותר לפדותו גם בהיות מכדי דמיו, או משום שלא קיבל את תירוץ התוספות להראש, או משום שלא קיבל את עצם חידושו של רבי יהושע שאין לו שום מקור אחר. So obviously this is something that Harambam did not bring, and it could be that Harambam did not bring it because he saw this as a situation that was outside the normal realm of Halakhah. He didn't see it as something, obviously he wasn't dealing with the Rosh and the Tur, he predated them, even the Rosh, even though some of their time elapsed slightly, but, they weren't on the same playing field, they weren't dealing with the same things, he wasn't looking at the Tosafot, so this was something, okay, this was a, extenuating circumstance, and he did not bring it for Halakhah. It's a Halakhah that developed later on, and it became normative Halakhah. עוד דוגמה נפלאה לחידוש הלכתי בתירוסם השני של התוספות על מעשהו של רבי יהושע שפדה שבוי יותר מכדי דמיו. הנה בשעת חורבן הבית לא שייך דלה לגרבו עד כאן, וזו באמת תמוה היא, וכי היכן מסר רבי יהושע סימוכין לסברה זו לפרש שאין הדין שאין פודין את השבויים יותר על כדי דמיהן חל בשעת חורבן הבית, ומה נשתנה? אלא שסברה גדולה בדבר, שכן כל עיקר הטעם הוא שלא ימסרו נפשם האויבים לשבות יותר ויותר שבויים, ובתקופת החורבן, הלא אז נקיימה בעם ישראל כללת התורה, והתמכרתם שם לאויביך לעבדים ושפחות ואין קונה. So they're saying this situation where we're talking about Rabbi Yehoshua brought another thing, that this law of not redeeming, more than the person is worth, what happened over here? It did not apply at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, only applied after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, because after the Beit HaMikdash, we have a pasuk in Devarim, towards the end of Devarim, it's in Ha'azinu already, it tells you that you're going to be sold to your enemies, you're going to become Ahmadim, you're going to be Shafahot, nobody's going to come to redeem you, this and that. So he says this is a law that didn't exist when the Beit HaMikdash was around, because these Pesukim didn't come into play. But once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, then this law came into play. Again, Hidush that he made that didn't exist before in Torah Sheba'al Peh, if you will. Continues now, Rabbi Haim David HaLevy. At that time, the military force of Am Yisrael was completely broken in Yerushalayim. ובני ציון היקרים המשולאים בפז נפלו בהמוניהם בידי שוביהם הרומאים. At the time of the Roman legions, the Romans totally destroyed them, and they took people, and that was the end of everything, as we know from various kinot on Tisha B'Av and such. ולא היה קיים אז שום מסב כדי לגרבו ולהייתו. ולכן חידש רבי יהושע חידוש הלכתי שאין לו שום מקור קדום, and because of this, Rabbi Yehoshua made this חידוש in Halakhah that had no previous source, based upon his reasoning and understanding. Fine. So he gave us all this just to show us that the Hachamim did make up new halachot based upon situations that didn't exist before. Now he's going to get back to the actual question at hand. שחכמי ישראל הקדמונים לחדש הלכות על פי האלוהים שיזדמנו בדרך החיים הלאומיים. This was the strength of the Hachamim, the early Hachamim, to create new halachot based upon situations that happened in their life, in their national lifetime. ולא להסתפק במקורות ההלכה הידועים מפורסמים. They didn't just rely upon well-known halachic sources, but if they had to create new things, they did it. ולא חכמי התלמוד בלבד, and not only the Hachamim of the Talmud, like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Perachia that we're talking about over here, okay, אלא גם גדולי הראשונים, even the great rabbis of the ראשונים, ואפילו גדולי האחרונים, even the great האחרונים, עשו כן וחידשו בסברתם וחוכמתם חידושי הלכה. We saw this throughout the ראשונים, throughout the האחרונים. Anytime you had a great Hacham, somebody with tremendous understanding, okay, and a grasp of not only halakha and the halachic thinking and methodology, but as well as social factors, okay, and something that affected the nation, they went for it. V'dugma lekach, he's going to bring us an example. Ki teshuvat haradbaz. Okay, as we know, we've mentioned the Radbaz many times. David ibn Abi Zimra. He was originally from Spain. He was exiled. From there, he went to Egypt. He was a rabbi there for many, many decades. And from there to Safed, he lived over 100 years. And he wrote over 2,000 teshuvot. Okay, so he was one of the greatest Hachamim. שטרח למצוא טעמי היטל למה שנהגו לבדות שיבויים יותר על כדי דמיהם הנמכרים בשוק משום דקיימלן דטעמה הוא דלמה לירבו ולייתו ומסרו עצמם לשבות מהם והרי אנו רואים בזמן הזה שהשיבאים אין יוצאים לכתחילה בשביל לשבות שיבויים בישראל אלא כל מי שימצאו. Says he worked hard and very diligently to find a way to say it's mutar, to redeem people more than what they're worth based upon different situations. Because nowadays you're seeing, like we're saying, he was somebody that was exiled from Spain. So he saw the nation at a very, very low, pitiful state where Jews were being taken captive left and right by Christians and by Muslims in different lands. They were being sent around, they were being used, they were being abused, they were being used as slaves, and they were being taken in great numbers, and nobody cared because the Jewish nation themselves, they were in a difficult. Each one was scared of being, grabbed and thrown out, so they couldn't do much for their own. So what do we do? Where do we get the money? How do we do it? Can we ransom people for more than what they're worth? Can we just ignore the whole situation? He dealt with a lot of that at best. Okay, even if we redeem them for more than what they're worth, but if we start redeeming them for more than somebody would redeem a non-Jew, okay, yes, it's mutar for us, but it's only going to cause them to kidnap more and more Jews. But maybe we just don't tell the people and leave it alone, because it's too difficult. ובעצמו מרגיש הרדב"ז שיש לבעל הדין לומר שעל אף כל התנאים הללו הוא אומר לדעתנה אין פונים לשיבויים יותר בכדי דמיהם מכל מקום יש הדחות לדלמה לאירי הטענה שיבויים דאית כל הנדע אמרן וכיוון שהדבר ספק הוא הנח להם מישראל להחזיק במידת רחמים. Leave our nation alone, don't tell them anything, let them have this midah of rahamim when they're going through such a deen that's being applied to them, and they still have this state of rahamim. Leave it alone. Hanach lahem Yisrael. It's okay. Leave Am Yisrael alone, and don't tell them the details of what the law really is. If they feel they have to redeem and they can redeem, let them do it. בסברה זאת של הרדב"ז היא חידוש הלכתי שאין לו שום מקור. And this reasoning of the Radbaz, again, has no precedence in Halakhah whatsoever. And you see, even he's stuttering a bit in his Hidush. He's saying it, but at the same time, you feel he's not so comfortable with it, but he has to say it. So even though at the end, he said, leave them, leave Am Yisrael alone, let them do, because they need to strengthen themselves in that midah, in that trait of rahamim, of mercy, of compassion. And based upon this, we see that there are situations, all different types of special situations, and times change, and situations are different. You cannot build a Pesach Halakhah only based upon Mikorot. ויש צורך ברור לחפש פתרונות ברוח המקורות בנאמנות מוחלטת להם ולחדש חידושים הלכתיים. And the Hacham always has to take in so many factors into account when deciding Halakhah. And this is something we talked about years ago in many of our classes, that we saw certain Hachamim only have, these are the four walls of Halakhah, and Shulchan Aruch says this, and Shulchan Aruch says that, Shulchan Aruch says that. We cannot take the human touch. We cannot look at sociological factors. We cannot deal with psychological factors. And if we look just a short time ago, if we go back 100 years ago, when there were so many modern developments, we saw that Hachamim dealt with things differently, and they saw that these are things that are here to come and stay. And if we don't find a way to allow them for Am Yisrael is going to reject the Torah. So we have to find a way to make things move hand in hand. I don't want to bring up examples now, okay, but we had a lot of different situations, whether we're dealing with electricity on Yom Tov, or whether we were dealing with the instrument for the mohel to use for for doing mesisa, and many other situations that we had. We see that the Hachamim definitely were mahaddish. They created new nuances within the Halakhah, even though they weren't strictly written. They created them because they were needed, and they saw Halakhah as being something that, as we saw,
hot water on Shabbat for the baby.
Hot water on Shabbat for the baby. We also saw that somebody wants to have hot food on Shabbat now, we could put it in the freezer, okay, let it get solid, and then you could put it, food that was completely lach. You could take soup and take it and put it on, on the heat source and let it reach a boiling point even. But it's okay because it was completely karush. It was completely, it became solidified. These are Hidushim and Halakhah. That was Rabbi Moshe HaLevy, Halakhah Shalom. But the point is, Halakhah, as we saw that in the introduction of Rabbi Uziel, whose first volume of Mishpatei Uziel, and we saw in the writings of Bi'Eliyahu Hazan in Zichron Yerushalayim, we saw so many times they talked about how the Halakhah is, as we talked about, is in motion. It's Torah in motion. It's not static. It's not frozen. Because once you freeze Halakhah, you freeze the nation. Okay? And this is what Rabbi Haim David HaLevy is telling us now. We have to deal with a situation that we didn't have before. And we have to deal with it in a way that the people are going to be able to accept. We'll continue. כבר כתבנו ברוח דברי התוספות בתירוסם השני, שכתבו שבשעת חורבן הבית לא שייך דלה לגרבו, שגם במלחמה שאנו נתונים בה לא שייך דלה לגרבו, והמציאות מוכיחה יום יום שאין הם יכולים לתפוס שבויים בישראל. And we see, he's telling you, because today we see that these terrorists are constantly trying to capture members of the Jewish nation, and they're unable to. ושבויים אלה שנפלו לידם היו במצב במלחמה בלבנון. But in those that did fall into their hands, it happened due to the situation of being in war within Lebanon. בתנאים שאינם ברורים עדיין דסוקם, and under conditions that are still not 100% clear to us. ועל כל פנים, טעם תהילה לגריבו לא שייך, ולכן לא שייך גם דין שאין פה דין את השבויים יותר על כדי דמיהן, ועל כל פנים אין ללמוד איסור מהמשנה הזכר לעיל. Because we're in a different situation. We're in a situation of war. If we're going to allow soldiers that are captured in war to just be taken and forgotten about, okay, he didn't say it yet, but you're going to destroy the morale. You're going to destroy the morale of the army, morale of the country, morale of the Jewish nation. And it's over then. And then they're just going to give up. And we're going to give up on Eretz Israel. And you can't let that happen. So our situation is different. And if you have to redeem it more than they're worth, you redeem it more than they're worth. Nisayin, let's make note. Shekol debarenu lo no'adu lifsok halakhah. Okay? Because I'm not coming to make a halachic ruling. Illa kemasa umatan shel halakhah. I'm having a halachic discussion. Ki lehadusha halachot and skirot la'il, dirusha samchut al-khatid gedola biyoter. Because to make, new halachic rulings like this, you need great hachamim. Okay? Ki'ain as-Sanhedrin, like people like the Sanhedrin, or the Fahot, Mossad, Ba'al, Samchut, Mamlachtit, Lefsok, Bechod, Ba'ayesh, Ta'orer, Bahayim, Medinim, Asibayim, Al-Umim, or at the very least, an institution, okay, based upon, a government recognized institution that makes rulings of any sort of situation that may come up in our nationalistic military movement now. And if we had the zechut, we had the merit and the privilege to have such a thing, then we could try to have the courage, okay, to make such halachot. But let's come back and let's emphasize once again, שמאותה סוגיה אין שום הכרעה ברורה לאסור את עסקת חילופי השבויים כי יד הדוחה נטויה ככל נזכיר לעיל. Okay. He goes, but let me come back and reiterate and stress that from that sugya in Gittin that Rabbi Gordon brought up, there is no distinct fact that tells us that we must follow that, or that it is asur to exchange prisoners for prisoners. Okay, we're talking about terrorist prisoners for our what do you call it, our kidnapped soldier. Okay, so even though he's telling you I can't make a ruling, and I'm just having a discussion, at the same time, well, we can't follow that either. This is very well said. If we're dealing with sibara, with reasoning, Hinekoteb Hagon Rabbi Shlomo Goren, במאמרו נזכיר לעיל כמה פעמים שעסקה זאת הגבירה והגדילה את כוחה המספרי ועיקותי של המנסחים על ידי שחרור מספר כה גדול של מחבלים מאומנים. Because by having this exchange, all you're doing is you're increasing the amount of murderous terrorists that are going to be out there attacking you. Okay? Yes, his reasoning is correct. He's true. Let's ask though, and do you think the people that were involved in this trade, in the deliberations, in the determining, what we're going to do then, you don't think they thought about that? You don't think they know that? He goes, the Secretary of Defense, was involved. He knows what's going on. And he spoke in front of, the government officials. There was even another point that brought up. See, like I said, the morale of the IDF. When a soldier knows he's going to fall into the hands of the enemy, if he knows the entire nation has got his back, they're behind him, they're going to be there to save him, to free him. then he's going to give his service on the front lines, not 100%, 1,000%. He's going to give it his all because he know he's safe, unless obviously he dies. But obviously, he's going to go for it. But if we put into effect a law that we're not ransoming anybody back more than what he's monetarily worth, then even in this case, when the soldiers are sent out to war, as screw it, I'm gonna retreat. Okay? Or well, why should I fall into enemy hands? So now tell me, what is the greater problem for national security? If the guy retreats, or if you let out some terrorists from jail? If the guy retreats, then the enemy gets further and further into the land, and they take over more land, and they kill more people, and they do more destruction. Okay, yeah, you're strengthening them. You're giving, the terrorist organizations, that oomph that they need, by releasing their buddies. Okay, but the but the amount of morale boosting that you give to our people, okay, by them knowing that no matter what you got them, that's going to be much greater. And yes, this is a חידוש הלכה. שמי מקרא כזה או דומה לו נידון בכל אותן הלכות שנכתבו סביב המשנה שאין פודין שבויים יותר על כדי דמיהם. Nothing like this is written in any of the commentary on the Mishnah that we've seen. בטוחני, I'm positive, שאם הייתה שאלה מעין זו עומדת בפני חכמי ישראל הקדמונים, but if such a question was raised and put before the earlier Hachamim of Israel, the Hachamim that wrote the Mishnah, basically, okay? Hayu Moseim la Pitaron. They definitely would have found a solution. Toch ma'amas tehiddush hilchati beruach mikorot halakhah kodumim. And they would have found it within the framework and within the mindset of early halakhah. Lachen, in nir'eh la'aniyut da'ati, she'mshei Yisrael pa'ala b'nigud lahalakhah. Because it does not seem to me that the Israeli government did anything in its actions against Halakhah. וייתכן אף ששיקול דעתה הייתה דווקא תואמת חידוש הלכתי שחכמי התורה היו מחדשים מקרה זה. And if anything, I think they came up with a חידוש הלכה that the early Hachamim would have come up on their own. The government made a חידוש הלכה that the earlier Hachamim would have come up with if they were in that situation. You know what kind of statement that is? It's wild. ועל כל פנים, לאחר מעשה ודאי שאין להרהר ואין לערער אחרי החלטה ממשלת ישראל ההחלטה. And especially after the fact, this is already done, and you're going to come and say it's not right and it's bad and this and that. How dare you do such a thing? It's done. Leave it. Our guy is out. Obviously, you could find ways of, making these negotiations better. How many people are you going to let out? What kind of people, whatever it may be. But bottom line is, our guy is saved. The army's morale is boosted. The nation's morale is boosted. We're fighting. We're winning. We're doing what we have to do. And we pray to Hashem that He establishes peace for us. And inshallah, we merit that our original judges and our original advisors are put back in their place, and we'll have halakhah the way halakhah is supposed to be. Beautiful teshuvah. He's dealing with reality in a way that we really don't see at all. We don't see it, and it needs to be seen. I don't think there's any words to say. There's nothing to add to it. There's really nothing to add. He took Rabbi Gordon, he raised him up, Yes, you understand the halakhah. Yes, you built a beautiful teshuvah. Yes, you make all the sense in the world, but our situation is different. And we never had just cause to deal with it, and we never had sources for it. And this is our job now. The Torah continues. The Torah lives. Fantastic.
So if they didn't have Jewish soldiers now, and they just took regular Jewish hostages, would it be a little bit different? I'd say because it's not army morale.
I disagree
I'm
because,
guessing.
but I'll say, but
Yeah.
your average person, the average Israeli citizen today,
What's the soldier?
is a soldier.
Okay.
They're part of the military. And that is even what Hamas is saying. Okay, from day one, Hamas is saying, what do you mean these are civilians? These are not civilians. Each one of them, is an army man. They said it in their interviews. So every time they get them on BBC or on any other thing, that's what they would say. Was so you're telling us we're killing civilians? No, we're killing army officers.
He doesn't deal with the number, 1 for 1,000.
He doesn't deal with it at all.
I don't know, I disagree with it.
You could
No,
disagree.
it's fine.
You could-
His approach is
You could disagree with it. I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree.
His entire approach, it's not
No, yeah, exactly. We're dealing with the approach.
an angle that none of us saw beforehand.
Right. As far as disagreeing with it, yeah, I think you have to, because
In retrospect, it's even happening.
listen, right, but you have to also understand these people, no matter what you do, they're never going to be satisfied. They're savages. They're brutes.
No, but you're right, Seth, the number you
Right.
can work on the number.
Right,
but
you
the-
can work. You can work on fixing the fine details.
Not 1 to 1, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to.
You're right, Seth, he's not for 1 to 150.
Right, but at that moment, that was the only situation they had. So,
No, I'm saying that.
right
No.
now,
In many ways, this whole argument disqualifies everything that happened beforehand, because now you're in a situation where there is a state of Israel, where even if you have Jewish hostages taken, now there is a military for Jewish people. So he's just saying all the precedent that happened before doesn't apply, and it may not even apply the way it was set before.
right, absolutely.
Interestingly enough, on this past attack, one of the guys that was released in the Gilad Shalit trade was one of the masterminds of
That's
it.
right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But there's a million of them anyway. What's the difference?
Yeah.
There's no easy answers.
No.
There's no easy answers. Just, I think the key factor over here, though, is the morale. I think that is the key thing. If you ask any Israeli, that they know that they're going to war, the country is behind them. They know
That's for the average citizen, but also I think that this teshuvah, or whatever you want to call it, because he doesn't want to call it a teshuvah, gives an out to the government. It gives them the ability to do these things where maybe their hands would have been a little more tied.
Right, but what do you gain? In other
You
words,
gain flexibility.
right, okay, but they made a decision that it was more important. The government made the decision that was more important to get their soldier out, okay, than to leave him there in enemy hands to be tortured for whatever reason.
Agreed, but I think this article, this thing is more than just that. Like it, for example, look who was released last week. You had a couple of elderly people.
Right.
Those people, you're not considering them as soldiers now. It's not for me to decide how much of value to place on a life, but I think if you're negotiating for soldiers and for people who are of tactical value, or like you mentioned before, a brilliant individual, this gives a little bit of halachic flexibility to the people who are making that decision.
All right, but as of right now, we haven't released anybody.
Right.
We don't know what their demands are really going to be, how we're going to proceed with things, who they're letting out, under what conditions. Even the ones that, were let out, the first 2 were American. The second 2 were elderly people who, there's mixed reviews as to what really happened to them, because they really can't speak. At least one of them hasn't spoken at all. The other one is only saying a little bit because her husband is still in captivity. So we don't know what's really going on over there. And why they chose these people to let them out either.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, still missing information. And if, the Qataris or the Americans or another nation, is trying to broker these deals, why is it not happening? There's a lot of missing pieces over here, Jason. That's why I see it. But definitely, it leaves a lot of room, like you said, for the government to be able to do things.
Right. That's great.
I know, that's it.
Thank you for bringing this.
No problem. Thank you. All right.
Thanks. And even more important, thank you for in bringing life back to the class.
We're trying. We have to try to do it more often.
Okay.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you guys for joining. Appreciate it.
Take care. Good night, all.
Good night.
Thank you.